Welcome back to We Move Through Stormy Weather, a Fish podcast where we compare and contrast songs and the evolution of their jamming styles throughout the band's career. My name is Ryan Storm, and today I am joined by Amar Sastry. Amar is a musician who lives in upstate New York, and you may know him from his amazing Anatomy of a Jam videos on YouTube or his guitar covers on various social media platforms. He got into Fish around 1997 and started seeing the band in 2003. Amar, say hi.
Hey, everybody listening. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I'm very excited to have you as my guest for episode 2. And today we will be talking about Tube, both of our favorite songs. One that I know we've discussed at length before.
One of my absolute favorites.
Yes, and quite the jam vehicle. If you look at the right time period. Now, Amar, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about your pick? Which version is your favorite?
Sure. I with Tube, I think you have to. My favorite version probably changes on the day that you ask me, but
That's fair enough.
There's so many amazing versions. I chose 2003, a mid 2.0 jam, which is one of my absolute favorite versions of Tube. Clocks in at about 11 and a half minutes, and it's just amazing from beginning to end. And one of those jams where every time I listen to it, I discover something new.
Gets better. Yeah. Got a lot of the classic 2.0 sound in this one. My first note upon listening to it when I did a little breakdown is thick guitar tone, which is
Trey's
tone the hallmark of the era.
Sure, and it sounded. I remember from the very beginning of 2.0 how different he sounded, and to me it just changed the entire sound of the band. Just kind of a little bit more, felt like a bigger, crunchier sound. And it was this Tube has that in spades too.
Yeah, one thing I like about this Tube, it follows a kind of formula that I've seen a lot in 2.0, where it's not necessarily in this order, but the jam has like a big peak and then dissolves into spacey oxy jam stuff. If you look at jams like the Spack Piper, it does the spacey oxy jam first and then the big peak. But I think a lot of the big jams from this era have those two kind of aspects.
Yeah, the space sound and and that big classic Fish peak where the lights go white and everyone goes nuts and
beautiful
does that over and over.
Yes. And my pick, my personal favorite version of Tube is November 3rd, 2018 in Vegas. I know I think this one is extremely underrated. I think Miami 03 is as well. I think when people talk about Tube, they tend to go for 12/7/97, 12/29/97, Baker's Dozen, Chula Vista 2016. Those are kind of the more mainstream amazing ones. And I think this Vegas one tends to get overlooked. All three fall 2018 versions are phenomenal. This one is my favorite just because I think from minute one of the jam, all four of them are just so locked in. It sounds so driven, purposeful, like no meandering at all, in my opinion. And a lot of Tubes suffer from kind of a rocky transition into the blues ending. And this version goes back so well. We have, we have a nice major key jam because, of course, it's 2018. And after the big peak, Mike beautifully slides the band back into A minor, which is the key of Tube, and drops it into the blues. But that's one thing that sticks out to me about this version as well. And we can't exactly compare it to your pick because that one's unfinished.
Yeah, it's they're such different versions that, 15 years apart, I feel like two different bands when you listen to them side by side. There's so many changes.
Yeah, even a year apart, their sound is constantly changing, and their improvisational style is so fluid. And like the Baker's Dozen Tube doesn't sound like this one. That's only a year apart. But yeah, so let's get into a little bit more of the meat of these jams. So I think obviously both of them start off in the kind of typical Tube groove. Trey's doing his vamp on the A minor, and Page tends to take a lead early in a lot of tube jams, whether he's on clav or Wurlitzer or synth or organ. He tends to stick out at the beginning a lot of the time, I think.
Yeah, I think in the very early days of tube, before it became a jam vehicle, and when it was just a few minutes, I think that the jam section was essentially just a keys solo,
Yeah.
where they just do that for a little while, and the rest of the band would groove and support Page, and that
Yeah, if you listen to
that
the
changed.
first couple versions from 1990, that's what it is. It's basically the jam is a 30-second to a minute piano solo from Page. So that was, believe it or not, pre-clav.
That's right. Yeah,
Didn't get that until fall '94.
he had such a limited rig back in the early days. He had to
Yeah.
make a lot of sounds with not many options.
Yeah, and then we both have oh no, just kidding. There's no key change in the Miami one. Trey flirts with a key change at one point in it, but not that one. But so we did kind of make a conscious choice to try to steer away from the more well-known 1997 versions, because I think there's not much that's left to be talked about for the two December 97 big versions of Tube, I think. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, they're great versions, and I think a lot of us have listened to them so many times that we could sing all the changes and notes.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's so, and there wasn't like a ton of, there was that big group mind groove thing that they were trying to do, where, in terms of like grooving as one unit. So it's not. It seems like that's the focus. That was the focus for a lot of those jams. So it's it's the rhythmic aspect that makes those so classic. But the versions we're talking about, there's harmonically and melodically, there's a lot more going on, and a lot more experimentation. Whereas those the cowfunk tubes from the late '90s are in comparison one-dimensional. Not that they're one-dimensional, but when you compare them side by side,
they do one thing really, really well.
Right, and they were trying to do that, weren't they? They were trying to really.
Yeah, that was the goal.
So mission accomplished, right? Trey was trying to solo less a lot in those days, and give more space to the other members, and it seemed like a very conscious choice that he talked about in interviews about playing less, and they did that for a long time. And for these versions, that kind of mindset went out the window, which I'm thankful for.
Yeah, which I mean, you can see kind of the last bits of the kind of template for late '90s tubes in this Miami one. Like, you've still got a mic breakdown. Like, there's still Fishman has a breakdown as well, which is in a lot of those late '90s tubes, like a little like rhythm guitar Trey breakdown, like a mic breakdown.
The start stop jams. Yeah, that's
yes.
all. And the thing about the late '90s, the '97 tubes, is that a lot of those those start stop jams happened in predictable order. You kind of knew who was going to go. At least in retrospect, I'm sure at the time, it felt really.
When that sound had only been around and tapes weren't as easy to get your hands on, I'm sure there was more of a novelty. But
but like I know for the Miami tube, it was I think Trey does one of the first start stops, everyone else stops, and then Mike and Page battle a little bit, and then Fishman does an anti-drum solo where he's
I love when he does that.
They're so good, because I think he's talked about this at length in press, where he's like, I don't like doing drum solos.
Yeah.
He hates them, and I know he's appreciative of the art of the solo, but he says that's not for him, which is funny because he's so good at it. Like, he doesn't, but
Octopus.
he's got he's got that big FU attitude when it comes to drum solos, and it shows. Like especially in that version where he's all over the place, and it sounds so good, and it's really unpredictable and unlike any drum solo I've ever heard, which is probably his intention.
Yeah, I know. My favorite is when he'll like be absolutely tearing it up during a song, and then they'll do an anti-drum solo, and it's like if he had just kept playing what he was doing before, it would have been an awesome drum solo. But he purposely like I know one that I remember was Meat from Hampton 2018.
I think I remember that one.
Yeah. And another really cool thing about this version is, I mean, regardless of whether they were like spacey and ambient or rockin', there was a lot of intensity to 2.0 jams, I think. Because I think that's due in part to uh, those being some of Mike and Fish's best years. Um, I think it also might just be because Mike was really nice in the mix in that era. But I notice in a lot of 2.0 jams, Mike and Fish are absolutely locked, and the grooves are just amazing. I think that definitely contributes to the intensity, even if Trey and Paige are both just dicking around with effects and noises and stuff. You still got that grounded bass. And at the end of this Miami tube, when it kind of drifts off, Fishman's still holding the beat, while everyone else is just going off into outer space. I think that's really cool. That's I like it.
Yeah, that's a good point. The mix, I felt like, added so much to their direction in a lot of jams and songs and performances, because 2.0 was that was the last time that Paul Languedoc was behind the boards, who was the famous luthier who built Mike and Trey's basses and guitars. And that was his. I think he started running sound in the late 80s or mid late 80s, pretty much since the beginning all the way till the end of 2.0. And he, I really, he's to me very much an unsung hero in the scene, because of how good his sound was. I remember which was probably the best sounding outdoor concert. It was the most crystal clear sound I've ever heard in my entire life. I couldn't. And I remember getting there, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this is why people travel thousands of miles to see this band," And it was
Yes.
it was so. And I think I know a lot of people took it for granted, and I know the new guy is great too, obviously, but Paul was really had something special, and in those 2.0
do we know what
years,
his name is?
I think it's Gary Brown, Gary with 2 R's, I believe.
Shout out Gary Brown.
Yeah, I believe, I could be wrong about that, but I believe he runs front of house for them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know I really enjoy. I've enjoyed a lot of the mixes from the past few years. I know there were a few years in kind of mid 3.0 at this point, like 2014 and 15, where Mike was got kind of low in the mix, but they brought him back up recently, and very nice.
Yeah, 2009 was very, at least for this. I don't know what other people feel, but that was
a
really
recalibration.
Rough. But I mean, you're right. The thing is, I remember the very 3609, the first comeback show. It was I don't think I've ever heard worse sound at a Fish show in my entire life.
You were there?
Yeah, I was there. Yeah, I was there. And it was probably the mix was all over the place. It was like people would just disappear. Maybe it was just my memory of that night. And I saw a bunch of shows over summer 09. It started to get better and better. And I think probably by the end of that year they had it pretty dialed in. And Gary was new to the mix, so definitely a huge learning curve. But
yeah, I'm a big fan of like 2010 through 2012. How the sound was.
Yeah,
like
those
a lot of Mike.
For sure, yeah, very crisp sound, and I think it's a universal fan thing that everyone wants Mike as loud as possible for
people
for
a louder
reasons.
Mike,
right?
Which I think that in turn played a big role in a lot of the funk jams in the late '90s. Tying it back to the subject that we're talking about, we're really bad at staying on topic.
I mean, that's if Fish can do it in their music, if they can meander, why can't we? Right?
Fair enough.
It's not like we're talking about. I'm not going to name an artist right now because I'll get death threats. But yeah, so it's. I think it's okay to move around and segue from topic to topic. But to your original point that the the 2.0 sound had a lot to do with it. Mike and Fish being especially loud and present in the mix came out in a lot of those jams where feels like Paige and Trey had to do rhythmically a lot less if they wanted to, because Mike and Fish were so present and so dominant and so driving, and like that Miami tube.
Yeah, and I want to let's build a little bridge here between Miami to Vegas. Some of the key versions in between. I know, I'm sure many people know, most tubes pre 2016 or so or from '09 to 2016 were more 3 minute kind of funk jam affairs, similar to how they were in the earlier '90s. I mean, but with more funk. And I mean, the big Chula Vista 2016 kind of comeback jam for the song, it was huge. Then Baker's Dozen, obviously, which is the big one. I think those versions all kind of built on ideas, and now we get from 2018 and 2019 especially. I don't think there's a single version that's just a straight up tube jam. I think every version from those 2 years, even the 6 minute ones that don't break out of the song per se, have a little bit of extra something to them. I think that's part in due to Trey's expansion of his effects in his rig and Page's addition of his synths, which obviously have played such a huge part in jams from the last years, in the last couple of years. And in the Vegas one, he uses his synth beautifully. In At around just before the 4 minute mark, just play a little clip of this. He moves away from the clav and does a really nice walk down thing on the synth, which I really like. So play a little clip of that. So yeah, that's the synth lord himself, Page McConnell, which he also goes synth lord in the Miami Tube towards the end.
He does, yeah. That's right.
My last note of the song is Page is summoning spaceships on CS60.
Yes, that's spot on. It gets the wheels fall off in that jam, and it's like a beautiful, controlled way. And if you've ever tried playing that weird kind of spacey thing they do in the in that Miami Tube, if you tried doing that like with other with other musicians, it is so hard, and they make it sound I remember when I first started listening to that kind of stuff that they would do. Yeah, and it's like I was like, oh, they're just kind of like, at the time I was like, oh, they're kind of like playing, nonsense. And you listen closer, you're like, oh no, there's some deep shit happening here. It's really, it's like they're really going out there, and it's so hard to put into words how they do it, but it's, everyone knows it when they hear it, that kind of out there space thing where
those are my favorite kind of spacey jams, when Fishman is still holding down the rhythm and there's still like a bass to it, but it's like drifting off a lot. So I mean, and I do prefer it when they don't do that for 20 minutes. Looking at you, Fall 99.
Right.
But maybe I just realized I made a Fall 99 joke about the same thing in the last episode, so maybe I'll just make it a thing. Every episode I trash on Fall 99 for having 20 minutes of the same jam.
That's callback humor, I think they call that in the industry, maybe. That's great.
Do a contest in like a year, like find all the timestamps of all of my Fall 99 jokes.
Yes, and you will win a Fall 99 recording of your choice.
That's not bad. Gotta write that down. Remind me in a year. Anyway, back to the jams. You gotta let's take another piece out of this Miami Tube. Your favorite part?
It has to be. So the start stop jams are instantly great. That it starts and a lot. And I think what I love about this too is that a lot of start stop jams don't happen till later in songs, but this one happens like I think less than a minute into the jam. So I think like that they're kind of in a playful mood. So I think that's probably one of my favorite things is how it starts, and it felt, at least at the time, unexpected to have a start stop jam so early in a jam.
No wooing.
Right. No wooing. That was.
I wish there was a way that you could woo while you're at the show, but then it just doesn't show up on the recording.
There is a way. You just have to woo silently, like inside.
Yeah, that's hard.
It is hard. Yeah.
When you're in the building, it's really hard not to.
See, I mean, it's obviously Trey's at fault because he eggs the
He
audience
like
on to
yeah.
woo much of the time. So I
Yes.
can't, I'm still allowed to bash on wooers while wooing myself. That's okay. It's
Yeah, and I know I forget if it was you or someone else brought up on Twitter yesterday, like, man, back in the, 'cause we were watching about the Halloween streams, and it's like, wow, people in the '90s used to know how to clap on the 2 and 4. And I was like, yeah,
underrated
what
skill.
happened?
That's there's this great YouTube video. I think it might be Harry Connick Jr. I know it's like a very famous keyboardist singer. I believe it's him. He's playing at some big gig and the audience is clapping on the 1 and 3 and he adds an extra beat and all of a sudden they're clapping on the 2 and 4 and it's just so masterful.
That's
Like
awesome.
that's how
Yeah.
you that's it's a professional right there.
Yeah. So I think that's part of the problem with wooing is that, you have all these wooks in the crowd who aren't paying attention to the time and just yelling woo in the break.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's part of why people don't like them. But
You know what's
anyway,
yeah, that's true.
um, let's play a clip of those woo list start stop jams from this Miami too. Yeah, I love just breakdowns are fun.
Yeah,
They're
it's
fun.
a lost art, and Fish kind of made it their own thing, and a lot of R&B and funk bands used to do that all the time, multiple times a night sometimes, and at their shows, and it's a very classic kind of sound that at least
Yeah.
I hadn't heard till Fish started doing it in kind of a modern context, and it's so, and of course they're improvising it right there.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think part of that came from like summer '97, the development of the funk when they had that James Brown VHS on the tour bus.
right.
And I mean, you hear this start stop breakdown thing in the Virginia Beach '97 gin. Um, like they do like some shenanigans where they like do like a 4 count break or something like that, which is that's what they were getting from the James Brown thing, which is really cool. I didn't know about the James Brown thing until they did that dinner and a movie, and somebody mentioned that online, and I think that's a really cool detail.
Yes, that
Um,
was Mark Brownstein, I believe, from the Disco Biscuits, who said that
mm,
he actually got to watch that VHS on the tour bus with the band. And I asked him to tell the story, and he's like, "Oh, it's for another time." So
that's
hopefully
phenomenal.
one day he'll tell that story.
Yeah, yeah. Shout out Brownie, cool guy. Um. Anyway, back to jamming. So I keep saying that. Um. It must be you because I don't think I was getting sidetracked as much in the last episode. So
Yeah, it's probably that's very
damn you
possible.
for having
It's,
like so many intelligent topics to discuss in relation to this band.
I have a lot of
Um,
horrible things to say, so we'll just keep trucking.
hey, wrong band.
Right.
Um, so one of my other favorite parts of this Vegas tube is Page on the Wurlitzer during the Bliss portion. We've heard the piano Bliss jam, which happens later, and it's obviously amazing. But Page, there's something about Page being on the Wurlitzer or the Rhodes while we're in a Bliss jam that's just so alluring to my ears, and it sounds so nice. It's a bit gentler, I think. Um, Silky sound of the electric piano. His Trey solos. I think it's phenomenal. I think
Yeah,
it's
it's a big part, at least to me, is the with that sound, especially in that jam, is the Wurlitzer and the Rhodes. They're stereo instruments, right? So you hear like a warble from left and right between
especially the
channels,
Rhodes.
right? Especially the Rhodes. So it's like, to me, that's inherently psychedelic. Like just hearing that, just holding a note, holding like a chord on a Wurlitzer or a Rhodes,
Yeah,
to me is like, it's like a religious experience, just to hold it and just feel that warble, that kind of warp going from left to right speaker. And to
yeah.
me, it's very.
Especially, yeah. Another version of Tube that does that so well is Mexico 2019, February 22nd. That version gets a little bit spacey. Page hits the Rhodes. You listen to that in headphones, it's like he's wrapping you in a warm blanket of electric piano,
It's such a
and
nice
it's
sound.
beautiful, beautiful, and it's not always on. And it's sometimes it's harder to pick up at a show as well because you're in a big room and it's not being piped directly into both of your ears. Um, but when he switches that on when I'm listening, especially when I'm in the car.
Yeah, for sure. You feel it reverberate in the cabin.
Yeah, it's so good.
And Fish
So
is one of the few bands that can afford to tour with Wurlitzer, a Rhodes, and Organ, and a lot of bands don't
everything.
have that. Yeah,
Yeah,
and a lot of bands use digital, plugins and stuff to get that sound, and some of them can sound really good. I've used some in my recordings that I think sound great, but there's really nothing, at least to me, nothing can compare to the real analog kind of
yeah.
sound
Well,
of
yeah.
that.
In my rig, the only real instrument I have is a piano. Everything else is I have digital patches for them. But I know most bands. I think if they pick one or two of them, they go with an organ or a clav, and then they'll use a Nord. Um, but no, Page is too cool for that. He has a $6,500 Nord for his samples,
Wow,
so you
that's
can suck on that, musicians.
that's amazing. Well, I guess he's earned the right to ball out on his
Yeah,
rig.
yeah. I'd say that Page's rig probably is the most expensive, but I don't know how much guitar amps and racks and microphones and stuff costs for like Trey's rig and mics for that matter. Um, or how much a
Yeah,
marimba Lumina costs.
that's true. I think it's got to be some kind of custom instrument, right? You can't like order one from Guitar Center. I believe that
I
was that's.
that,
I'd like to order two marimba luminas, please.
uh, no, marimba Lumina price. Okay, it's only $5,000.
Oh, it's not bad.
Yeah,
I don't. I think I'm very ignorant about Train and Mike's, at least modern gear setup, but I don't think they have that many, like a ton of gadgets compared to a lot of other bands. So at least for Trey, the priciest part of his rig are probably his guitars, which are approaching close to priceless. Um,
I
you
don't
know,
think I think they're definitely priceless, all of them. Like I don't know if there's
right?
a like. I mean, you saw how much Jerry's guitars sold for after he died, but Trey's guitars are definitely priceless. Like those things are works of art.
Yeah, I want one just so I can hang it up and look at it.
Yeah,
I couldn't
don't
even
even
play
need to
it.
play it.
Don't even need to play it. Just
Yeah.
stare at it.
Yeah, just a replica of the Ossadok just in my bedroom. So it's the first thing I see when I wake up in the morning. I'm just like,
Yes. And and speaking of that, it's the big thing to me about the O3 sound, which this tube is probably one of the best examples of, is Trey took a little pedal called a compressor out of his rig, and uh, the compressor, if
Ross
you listen to,
compressor.
for example, like what's like a Guela Papyrus, something with with a lot of pop in the sound. He's got this thwack in all of his in his single note playing that's very very apparent and just a huge part of his sound.
Oh yeah.
And when he took that out of his rig, and his excuse was that he's like, oh, I couldn't find it or something.
Yeah, I think he lost it or it broke or something. And then in '09, when Fish came back, a bunch of fans got together, bought him a new Ross compressor, and sent it to him. And that's the one
yes,
that's still in his rig.
right, and to me, like, I don't buy that, because I don't think you take a pedal out of your chain that's been on your board for decades unless it's a very conscious decision. That's my opinion.
Yeah,
But I think, at the time, I don't think I loved it compared to that, really smooth lasery sound he had in the
yeah,
90s, because it was like big and very kind of hairy in '03. But in this Miami too, he goes into like three or four different solos, and he does this thing which I don't know any guitar player in the world can do as good as him, which is he'll kind of go in between rhythm playing and melodic soloing, while Page and Mike are weaving around him, and I've never heard anyone do it that way, and this tube
yeah.
is probably one of my
No
favorite
other band,
examples.
no other band jams like this. It's so
Right.
cool listening to the interplay because of the fact that even the other jam bands, most of them have gone through a lineup like multiple lineup changes. And
Sure.
I mean, Fish's lineup hasn't changed since Jeff Holdsworth left the band in 1986. Um, and they are one single mind when it comes to improvisation. That's their
Right.
thing, and
and
it's so cool.
anyone who's been in a band if you're within a band, if you're in a band with three other people, it's like you automatically have like three new wives, in the sense of having to maintain these very intricate relationships, and it's for them to be together that long, to me, kind of speaks volumes about their friendship and love for one another.
Yeah, but yes, your point about the switching between rhythmic and melodic playing is such a good point, and that's very present in a lot of tube jams because he does play a lot of rhythm guitar towards the beginning, and sometimes he'll kind of trade off with Page. He'll do some soloing and then go back to the rhythm, and he does that in kind of the beginning ish of the Vegas tube jam. He very much is weaving. Page and Trey are weaving around each other, and I love it. I love it. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's one of the things that they do, like you said, in almost every tube. There's that kind of back and forth between Trey and Page, where they're kind of on one team, and Fish and Mike are on another rhythmic team, in the sense of exploration. And sometimes it's a pretty strict dividing line, and sometimes they're all kind of doing it with each other, and it's uh, to me, that speaks of how malleable they are as improvisers, and how difficult it is to do, and how easy they make it look.
Yeah, yeah. Especially, as someone who, I'm in a Fish cover band. Modulating isn't always so easy, and when they do it, on a dime, or just so well, with each other is so impressive. Like, yes, it's the A minor to C modulation doesn't have much of a change in the sound except for the root note, pretty much. Um, but it's so cool listening to how it happens. Trey will, you know, start using C as the root note on the guitar. As a keyboard player, I'm not 100% sure how to get that different sound if you're playing the same runs of notes. Um, but I know the whole band catches on almost immediately, and it's really cool. Around just before 4.5 minutes, um, fantastic modulation. Um, and then the modulation back into the jam after the big peak at the end. After the peak, Fishman makes the spot on decision to bring back the tube beat around 8 minutes and 40 seconds, and then Mike slides it back into A minor. Let's play a clip of that transition back into the song, actually. Smooth as silk. That's the.
I don't know how they do it.
It's just one brain, 4 quarters. Yeah, and one other really, really cool thing about the Vegas tube that I like is Trey's use of the Mutron, the Ottawa envelope filter, Jerry Garcia effect, during the peak, because a lot of the time that's used for funk jams and funk, or and you think it would be more at home earlier in the jam when they were in the minor key tube proper. But I really love the way it's kind of like bubbles bursting at the peak. Each like whoop. I really like the way it adds to the kind of uplifting energy of that part.
Yeah, it's definitely used in a unusual place that you'd probably not see it in terms of that pedal. I've got that same one, that same MuFX Mutron clone, and it's probably the best clone I've ever heard. But it's very, at least for me, it's very difficult to dial in perfectly. Like you really have to sit there. It's got a bunch of knobs, and you really have to dial it in. I mean, it's one of those things where you could just plug it in and have fun. But so when I hear that,
to sound good,
right? Yeah, and it's also different. Like every guitar has the pickups, little magnets that pick up the sound of the strings. Essentially, every guitar responds differently, whether you're using single coils or humbuckers. So it's one of those things where you can tell he spent a lot of time dialing that sound in, because it sounds it's very euphoric.
And the pick attack has a big part of that as well. I know. My dad and I have been trying to get he has a micro Qtron, and we've been trying to dial in that envelope filter for years now, like 2 years now, I think, and it like works sometimes if he, his guitar has to be on the right pickup selection. He has to play with enough attack that it triggers the envelope filter. It's just it's crazy how effortless Trey makes it sound in this part of the song, especially because it sounds like at one point it just sounds like he's like playing so gently and lightly, and it's triggering the Ottawa, and it's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's an expert move.
Yeah. And expert difficulty.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely phenomenal. It's just, there's a reason he's my favorite guitarist. I think I really like this formula of kind of, exploring and then building to a peak that they've gotten into the last couple of years. Like 2019 especially, huge percentage of jammed out tubes. Huge. Off the top of my head, I think there was, out of all the versions played last year, I believe there was like one that wasn't jammed out.
Wow.
But most of them were like close to 10 minutes, like Key Change, Bliss Peak, which, yes, kind of cookie cutter, but it's awesome.
So. Sure, and they're always trying to do something, whether it works or not, or whether we like it or not is always up in the air. But for me, I'd rather I'd rather not hear tube if it's not going to be jammed. That's just my opinion. And it doesn't have to be
Yeah,
anything
and
crazy, you know.
yeah, and even if it's the traditional Bliss Peak, like that happens in a lot of versions of Everything's Right, where it starts. It's like funk jam, modulate to D or E, Bliss Peak, done.
Sure.
But they're fantastic jams because
Right.
it works. It's a tried and true method.
Yeah, and it's very, and to me, it's very honest. Most of the time, it's not what whether I like it or not is a different topic, but it seems very natural um, and
Yeah,
very of the moment. Doesn't seem contrived. Pretty much anytime they do it. Um, but if you've seen a Bliss Jam every night for the last 5 nights, then you may have a different take on it.
I mean, personally, I don't think I could get tired of it, but that's just me. I will also, I eat up everything that the band does, and I definitely fluff things. But
Well, hey, I mean, it's been what 9 months since the last Fish show, so I mean, I would
ugh,
do unspeakable things for even a predictable Bliss Jam. So I'm
I would do unspeakable things to for like a Coventry level show, even.
there. It's you don't know what you got till it's gone, right?
Yeah,
It's
just for them to perform, which I'm still holding out hope for New Year's. That's
I,
fingers
I
crossed.
I think you maybe let down, but
I know.
I hope you
I'm
know.
expecting to be let down, and I'm hoping I'm let down to the tune of Big Cypress. But you know,
You
I'm
mean they
also
like
probably going to be let down on that.
you mean you want them to
Scream
stream?
Big Cypress, yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that would be like the full 8 hour
Oh yeah,
long set
oh yeah. Just be in my basement by myself until with the lovely people on Twitter until the wee hours.
until the yeah. That's hey, I'd take it.
Listen, it's I'm hoping either Big Cypress or New Year's '95.
Ooh,
It's
yeah, that'd be something else.
25th anniversary of it.
That's true. Yeah, that I didn't think about that. That'd be. I feel like that's got a good chance of that happening.
Yes, yes. Yeah. I want to bring up one other version of Tube, to kind of talk about, which is July 6th, 2013. It's SPAC. This was the first version in 3.0, sorry, that went out of the box a little bit. So wasn't really jammed out, but it was kind of going, and then Trey pulled the plug. Um, about 5.5 minutes in, unfortunately, because it was like they were getting there. They went quiet a little bit, built back up, and they were very close to modulating to D. They flirted with it, and then Trey was like, "Nope, we're done," which is, I mean, he did that a lot in those days, which I think he's more inconsistent with that now.
Yeah,
I find that you know he's willing to, like, they go deep when they improvise, but sometimes there are questionable ripcords, especially last year.
yeah. That's there's this guiding principle that a lot of people I know that are highly skilled improvisers share, and that's if you as the player are bored, then the audience was bored 5 minutes ago. And I feel like he, the second he feels like a mood shift or something, it's he, But this is his instinct was the driving force of the band for even still to this day. So when he follows his instinct, it's
Yeah,
we're all strapped in for the ride.
yeah, and I mean, of course, also the kind of hesitancy. Hesitancy, is that a word?
I think
Um,
so. Yeah.
Trey being hesitant in from like '09 to 2013 ish was kind of understandable. Like he said in a Fish radio interview, I think it was on Ask Trey, uh, in 2018. He said that he doesn't think they got their mojo back until 2013, which I would tend to agree with. And it's why you don't jump into a hot tub. You ease yourself in.
Sure.
And so they were kind of dipping their toes in the water for the first year, and that's why there were no jams long like that reached the 20-minute mark in 2010, except for like a Yem,
Huh.
which is an interesting tidbit. Which, I mean, 2010 was a fantastic year. Like lots of great uh, shorter jams and tightness and energy. But nothing, nothing crazy. And I think that's something we definitely take for granted nowadays, which is the level of improvisation that we've been getting from the band recently, especially since the Baker's Dozen. I think, um, like a lot of people complain about the quote unquote 3.0 Bliss Jam, which I think started to become really, really prevalent in 2015. A lot of those summer 2015 jams go kind of that place, I think. And the Baker's Dozen had a lot of that as well. But a lot of jams in 2018 and 19 have gone dark, which that appeals to people.
For sure. Yeah, I'm one of those people. Give me my nightmare fuel. I want, I love the, to me, and it's also unpredictability, right? I feel like I
Right.
can hear most of the time. I can hear a Bliss jam coming from a mile away, but there are times where, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, where they'll
Yes.
be jamming and they'll bust right into it, kind of on a dime, and to me that's really very magical sounding when it kind of comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, I like a jam like the Alpharetta 2018 Carini that goes bliss, and then just when you think it's gonna fade into something else, it just gets dark and heavy
Yeah,
and
gets
nasty
really
and like
weird. Yeah,
explodes. Um, and I think one thing that's really cool is that they're doing new things with songs that they didn't used to. I mean, they're not jamming out every version of a song. Like if you listen to every Ghost in 1997, all of them have really sweet funk jams. But they weren't, or in the 90s they were jamming out a lot of songs everywhere. Now, it's not every show jams get placed in random spots, but it can happen at any show. And I think the surprise factor is one of my favorite things about the last few years is that they could drop a 20-minute jam in the first set. They probably won't, but they might. And songs that used to go deep all the time, for example, like 2001, doesn't usually, but then it's all the more special when they drop something like the Met last year.
yeah, for sure. It's not knowing when or where a big jam is going to happen. I think adds to the excitement factor, especially before a show, and when the lights go down, like that
Yeah.
feeling of it all kind of spirals out from that, and the big and also big jams out of songs that people may or may not like, especially newer songs. I remember when like
Yeah.
Fuego and that kind of stuff was happening, and then big jams started to come out of them and started winning people over. So it's goes both
Yeah,
ways.
that's the case I always make for something like Soul Planet when someone's like, "Oh, that song sucks," and I'm like, "But look at the jams."
Right. Yeah. It's the pretty much almost every version has some kind of big jam out of it, right? It's
Yeah, kind
pretty
of
common.
in 2019, especially like the last couple of versions have kind of been like, "Oh, like there's only a couple of minutes of jam in this one," but in 2018, like the summer 2018 versions, you have like, the first one from the first show, Type 2, like 13 or 14 minutes. Second one was like 17 minutes. Then you had the 23-minute one. Like they're putting the jams, like everywhere. And, there's songs that were like, I think Everything's Right, Set Your Soul Free, and Soul Planet, they were all written to be big jam vehicles, without a doubt. Like if you listen to how the jam section begins in each one of them, it's so open ended. It's so, especially Soul Planet. I think that Trey was like, Trey had like a we're gonna screw with everyone by writing these really cheesy lyrics that everyone's gonna hate, but the jams.
Right.
Um,
I love that scene. I think it's in between me and my mind, that Trey documentary where he's
yeah,
at Paige's house in Burlington, like showing him the chords to Soul Planet, and Paige is like, and then he's like shows him like like the fourth chord, and he's like, that's it. Trey's like, yeah, that's it.
yeah.
Um,
And then there's you reminded me of another thing in between me and my mind where he's like, yeah, like Ruby Waves, like this song doesn't go anywhere,
right.
and then look what happened there.
Yeah.
So it's so cool, and I think we react differently to when they don't jam out tube now than when they didn't jam out tube in 2014.
Right. Yeah.
Because in 2014 it was like, oh, they're still not jamming out tube, but now it's like, what, they jammed it out the last 12 times they played it. What's going on here?
Yeah,
So
the
it's
unpredictability factor. It's still there in tube.
best band in the land
Yeah, it's
for a reason.
and also we never really know when they're jamming it out when the blues drop hits when they go into the triplet section.
Yes,
So
yes.
it's
There's one version that I like, Dick's 2017, that one of the very few examples of a Page ripcord that I've ever heard.
oh really? What does he
It's just
ripcord?
he ripcords tube. Um, at that, I mean, the jam was amazing already, and it had been jammed out. But I think Page thought they were going to go into the blues break, and kind of missed from I think Trey and Fish that they like almost did, but then didn't. And then Page started playing the chords, and everyone else was like, "Oh, okay, I guess we're here now." So it's kind of like an
So
awkward.
it was just a missed cue in that
Yeah.
sense. Like it was like an intentional like he
No.
didn't.
I don't
I see what you
think.
mean.
I think Trey's the only one that intentionally cuts off jams, I think.
Right. And the
Um,
cue to go into the blues section is usually Trey looking at Fishman. Like I know he'll like
yes.
act like physically like turn around or face him and kind of give him a nod. And sometimes he does it. Sometimes he'll give Fish like a few bars. Sometimes he'll give him like a beat to do
Yeah.
it. And it's sometimes it's like it's really late and it's always fun. And it's to me it's like the sports kind of value of Fish of like throwing a pitch and seeing if they're gonna hit it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that in musical
Does it work? Yeah.
sense.
There's a lot of my notes on the key versions of Tube that I did is like Rocky into the blues section, abruptly into the blues section, like
Yeah,
or like atypical.
right. The vibes are so different from the funk jam into that blues section that it's the tempo shifts a little bit and they all have to kind of be on. It's not the easiest change. So I think there's a lot of room for error over the years.
Yeah, of course. Of course. It's a I mean, it's such a great song for jams, and it can you help it that it's not easy to transition into the last part of the
Right.
song. But one of my favorite things when looking at like the length of a tube, like they don't usually go over like 10 to 12 minutes, but a 15-minute tweezer has the same amount of improvisation as a 12-minute tube, pretty much.
That's a good
Like
point. The song itself is
because
like 2 minutes.
yeah, you're in the jam in under a minute from the beginning of the song.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
then there's like 2 minutes of song at the end, or a minute and a half
A minute
of
and a
song
half.
at the
Yeah.
end. So it's like 2 minutes of song total, and just got so much meat. So even the 3-minute ones have, I mean, you know, if you have a 6-minute tweezer, it's like but you have a 3-minute tube. There's still some grooves in there. I
That's a good
know.
point. Yeah.
I listen to the
Tweezer.
one from my first show in 2012 all the time, which is extremely groovy. And Page shines on a lot of these early 3.0 versions that don't get jammed out. It's like here's Page. He plays the clav really well. Enjoy.
Yeah, that's always special and one of my favorite. I don't know why I just thought of this. The Probably my favorite tube that I've ever seen was Asheville 2009. I think it's June 8th or 9th 2009, and it's not because it's particularly a standout version. I think it's okay, but at that show Trey tells the story about how he wrote
Yes.
tube and how he is when the band was at least him, Trey and Fishman, I think at one point were living together in the '80s, and Fishman went to go do something, and Trey found Fish's journal and wrote 3 songs from the pages. It's Dogface Boy, Tube, and I believe Gumbo. So he
Yeah.
wrote all 3 of those tunes kind of in I think like in the same like in an afternoon or something like or within
Yeah. It's like
you know
Tom's not available. See
right
what's in that
it's
journal over there.
in this acid journal of ramblings and that's why half the lyrics to Tube make no sense because I don't think he could read all of Fishman's handwriting possibly and made up
And
some words.
honestly, it could have been written by Tom in 1990 as well. Like same kind of nonsensical lyrics that are in a lot of Fish songs.
Right, could have been an email exchange between people that they made into a little poem. So has
They
that
do one
vibe.
of those like you sit in a circle and everyone says a word and you make a story.
Yes,
And asteroid crashed and nothing burned.
Man, I loved doing that. In high school, I remember my friends and I used to do that all the time. We'd do, like,
all the
take like a
time.
paper plate and like write. We'd pass a pen and write, and we just laugh for hours. And I remember I got to college and I tried to like get people to do it. And they looked at me like I was an idiot. I was like, it's really fun, especially if you're drinking and like we're hanging out. It's like it's gonna be fun, guys. And like
Yes.
we made it like a sentence, and I was like, no one wants to do this anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it's pretty solid. It's a great song. Go listen to our versions that we picked. They're very good. Um, thank you, Amar, so much for being on today. It's been lovely to speak with you and have this discussion with you. We apologize for all our tangents. We hope you enjoyed our tangents.
I apologize for no tangents at all.
Yeah, hope to have you back at some point.
Cool, man. Thanks. It was great being here.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to episode 2 of We Move Through Stormy Weather. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.